Hello, and welcome to Get Focused Millennial Matters, Episode 1, San Antonio Muslims. I'm your host, Denise Hernandez, a spokesperson for Growing Empowered Together, or GET for short. We connect the dots between personal experiences and public policy in order to motivate more young people to vote and volunteer in Texas. Thank you for joining us. Today's feature highlights the very distinct experiences of two San Antonio Muslim millennials, Sakib, Shaikh, and a surprise guest, Shahad, Bakr. Sakib is a board member of the Muslim Children Education and Civic Center, the largest mosque in San Antonio, where he also fills the role of chair of public relations and public outreach. Sakib has a bachelor's degree in political science from UTSA and a master's degree in international relations from St. Mary's University. Welcome, Sakib.
Thank you.
And welcome, Shahad. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Shahad Bakr. I'm from Kurdistan, South Iraq. I've lived here in San Antonio for 10 years, almost 11 years. I go to school, I'm for nursing. I go to school for nursing and yeah.
Thank you. Although there are approximately 2.35 million Muslims in the United States, there remains a misunderstanding of their culture, their faith, and their lifestyle. We're going to explore the commonalities and differences of our two guests and share the Muslim millennial experiences through their eyes. Let's begin by talking with our guests about the Islamic faith. So our first question for y'all today is, what do the words Islam and Muslim mean? And Sakib, we'll start with you.
So the interesting thing about the Arabic language is that a single word can have multiple meanings. And even in those multiple meanings, there can, the root words that are descended from the main word Islam, those words also have meanings. So for example, Islam, the literal translation of the words means to submit. So people take that out of context and means like in a humiliating way, you make someone submit. But what it really means is that you submit yourself to principles and virtues higher than yourself. And a Muslim is one who has submitted. So when you'll hear the words submit as a definition, and also the word peace. So within the root of the word Islam, the salama part, that means peace.
That's beautiful.
So it's almost like submitting yourself to peace.
Okay, Shahad, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
Submission and peaceful as well.
Peaceful.
Yes, the same exactly.
Okay. Briefly, what are the 5 pillars of the Islamic faith?
So the first pillar is Shahada, which is similar to her name, Shahad, which means faith, that you have faith. Then there's prayer. Then there's charity.
Okay.
Then there's fasting, which you do during the month of Ramadan, which is happening right now. I'm fasting. And then the 5th is it's called Hajj, performing the Hajj, which is a pilgrimage you make to the 2 holy sites in Mecca and Medina. But assuming one can afford it physically and financially.
Does the Islamic faith have much in common with Christianity or Judaism? Do you want to go ahead and
Yes, it does. It's all one God. We all believe in one God. There's a little bit of difference, but we all believe in one God. We all believe in same religion. It's not the same religion. It's just, how do you say? We all believe in one God. God has different meanings. I mean, we call it Allah. You call it God. Different. So it's the same thing.
So I mean, I would say what we have more in common with Judaism and Christianity is that we have Abrahamic roots as well.
The people of the book, right? Is what
Right.
we're
So that's a word in the Quran that's applied to Christians and Jews, which is a separate status, legal status. But that's the thing that we don't need to, the legal part of religion. But I would say the thing we have in common is our we believe in the same prophets. We believe in the God of Abraham. And similarities with Christianity. We believe in Jesus, the virgin birth, and we believe in Moses, Noah. So those same stories, almost verbatim, translate into Islamic literature as well.
I think that's a big misconception too. I remember when I was learning about Islam, I honestly, in my ignorance, was surprised that Jesus is mentioned so much in the Quran, and I feel like a lot of people don't know that or don't realize that, and I think that's really interesting that it is very common in people of the book again. Yeah.
I mean, there's some people that study the faith deeply. Some non-Muslims that'll study the faith. They know these things, yet they still kind of study from an angle of suspicion. That despite knowing the similarities we have, they'll either look for the differences or they'll kind of overlook the similarities.
So we understand that there is no head religious leader, like there's the Pope for Catholicism. So what role does the Imam play in Islam?
So Islam in practice is very decentralized. Like you said, there's no head figure, there's no like, Imam of this city or Imam of this state or anything like that. It's very localized. If a person chooses to live their life in accordance with the faith, so there's one thing about being Muslim as your identity. There's another thing if you actually want to experience the practices in your daily life. So for example, we have Muslims that don't pray, even though that's one of the pillars. So for that kind of guidance, you would go to the most knowledgeable person, and in that case, that title goes to what's called an Imam, or a Shaikh, or a Mufti. Different titles, but they generally mean the same thing.
In your experiences, are Christian, Catholic, and Jewish leaders in San Antonio specifically playing an active role in helping Muslims convey to their congregations the peaceful nature of Islam and the way that Muslims are peaceful at root, because that is your religion? Do they have any role in helping y'all kind of getting that message across to their congregation?
So in my experience doing interfaith work, some have great intention and they do the right thing. They preach absolute, message of tolerance, and some have bad intentions, and they preach the exact opposite. I mean, I'm not going to name names, but some have great intention. They'll come to the mosque, they'll call us, email us to visit their center. They'll bring people to the mosque and ask, can you give a presentation? And then, we can generally tell who's not going to do that, so we'll reach out to them. And no one's been outright rude to us ever, but they just won't return our calls.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Wanting to bridge those gaps, I guess. Huh?
Yeah.
So one of GET's primary functions is to motivate young people to want to vote. We work with many different groups and individuals who are motivated to vote or not to vote for a variety of different reasons. Sakib, tell us what motivated you to start a group called San Antonio Muslims Vote.
So let's go back all the way back to 9/11.
Okay.
Before 9/11, politics or the subject of politics was just something that Muslims would do as a time pass. Then after 9/11, when Islam and Muslims became the focal point of discussion on the news, it was really had by people who weren't experts in the field. Maybe they had some experience in Middle East politics, but they would kind of try to blend the religion together. So I knew that the first thing we had to do was take back the narrative. Our first job was to go out, speak. Obviously, I was young, so I was like 15 or 16 when that happened. But I knew as I got older, I had to do that. And the best way to do that is to vote. We can go on TV, as many times as we want, but it's not going to have the same effect as when we hold leaders accountable. And when we hold leaders accountable, we can only do that by having the vote. If we don't vote, our words fall on deaf ears. They will literally figure out that either we're not their constituents, we don't vote, and therefore, what people think of us, what they say about us, doesn't matter. And oftentimes we come at the expense of politicians galvanizing their supporters by demeaning us.
So what are your group's goals with SA Muslim Vote?
I mean, long story short, our goal is to get people to vote, get specifically Muslims to vote, get them organized, make them learn about the issues, to understand. You can talk to any Muslim and they'll have an opinion on American foreign policy. We want to get them educated on the issues outside of that.
So what sorts of reasons do the non-voting Muslim Americans give you for why they don't vote?
It stems from a number of reasons. Some old school Muslims will tell you that it's not permissible, it's not in the faith, it's against Islam to vote. Some will tell you that voting doesn't make a difference. Others will just tell you, I just don't have any interest in this. So they'll look at politics as a dirty sport. A lot of immigrants that come from Muslim majority countries, politics is a dirty sport. Working in government or knowing government, if you're part of the government, that means you've sold out in some way. So by participating, you're attaching yourself to that corrupt system, and they haven't experienced that kind of personal empowerment to be able to make a change in your neighborhood. So they'll stay away from it.
Absolutely. Shahad, do you have a similar experience with people that who don't vote, and they tell you why they don't?
When I used to live in Iraq, of course, they told me they're not allowed to, that it's against their religion, culture. Women are not supposed to vote, and yes, it used to be like that. But I don't know exactly how it is right now. But back then, when I was young, when I used to live there, women are not supposed to vote at all.
That's that kind of a culture shock.
Yeah, like a culture, yes.
It may even be something where legally they're allowed to
Yes.
vote,
They're
but culturally it's just looked down upon by engaging, getting involved.
President Trump has been doing a ban from some Middle Eastern countries. Should the government allow Muslims to enter this country? That's kind of a question.
I mean, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Many people are coming from other country because they have their own reason. They're going through a lot. They want a better future for their kids. They want a better future for their family, the whole family. And of course,
Absolutely.
everybody wants to come to the U.S. or go to Europe for a better future for themselves. And yes, of course.
Absolutely.
I think if you went about it differently, no one is going to argue against safety concerns. That if there's inadequate vetting in a certain country, then slow immigration down. That is all reasonable. But when you campaign that all Muslims need to be banned, or you just pick, in the first iteration of the ban, he said we're banning everyone from this country. But we're going to make excuses for some religious minorities. Well, when these countries are like 99% Muslim, so it becomes kind of obvious what your intentions are.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the stats going back the past 40 years with the refugee resettlement program, there hasn't been a single case of a refugee being involved in terrorism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or having committed a crime. There are cases. Sorry, I said crime. There are cases where they commit crimes, but anything that's religiously motivated or linked to a terrorist organization just has not happened.
Also, this is for you, Shahad. According to the Quran, like we kind of touched on earlier, women have the right to vote, of course.
Yes.
But again, culturally, many countries, like you stated, don't allow women to vote. As a Muslim woman, what are your thoughts on that?
Every woman has a right to vote. Every woman is supposed to have the right to vote. I lived in Kurdistan. I mean, every country is different, every leader is different, and then with the time, leaders change. So when I was in Iraq, like I told you, they were not allowed to vote. And when I was in Kurdistan, it was totally different. The women were voting. When I was in Syria, women could vote as well. So every woman has the right to vote and give their opinion, because we're all human at the end of the day.
If I could add, I'm not sure if it's completely accurate to say that the Quran recognizes the right to vote or encourages people to vote or anything. I think it's better to say that there is a tradition in Islamic history of personal empowerment and being able to voice your opinion about public affairs. So that tradition exists for men and women.
Awesome.
So that's absolutely true.
Thank you for that clarification. That's great. Why do you think that the rights given to women by Islam and the Quran are usually taken away by some leaders in the Middle East, like you mentioned? And what would you like to see changed in your country or the countries there?
So the Middle East and like Muslim majority countries in general, it's really difficult to kind of put them all together. They work very differently. Their governments work very differently. So for example, in the country of Pakistan or Bangladesh, where it's 99% Muslim, on paper women can vote. They have equal rights to men in every aspect. You'll go to some areas of these countries where the capital or the rules of the government just don't reach them.
Okay.
So, for example, in America, we don't really know what a village is in America. We're used to small towns, but a village is where, most of the time running water doesn't reach, electricity doesn't reach. They'll often rely on like a river nearby for agriculture, and they'll grow their food themselves. So these modern concepts of individual rights, government, the relationship between man and government, it just doesn't exist there.
Okay.
And so they'll resort to a sort of tribal law, for lack of a better term. And in that code of conduct, those rules are very strict and they're very ancient. So when these new secular governments come and they impose their way of life on these people that live in the agrarian side of society, there's constant clashing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So people mean well. They don't have harsh rules because they hate women or anything like that. It's just the way things have been done, and change is hard to do, especially when you're so distant from any metropolitan society.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Okay. GET encourages young people to become more civically engaged and to volunteer in their communities, because we understand that the community as a whole benefits from shared responsibility and caring, and we know that volunteers are more likely to vote. Charitable giving, like you mentioned, is also a fundamental part of the Islamic faith. Sakib, what is the Muslim Children Education and Civic Center, if you can explain that, and what are its goals?
So, first and foremost, we're a mosque, or in Arabic we call it masjid. We're a place of worship, so Muslims come from all over the city 5 times a day to perform their prayers. That's first and foremost, that's our job. Second, to instill Islamic etiquettes and the Islamic heritage into our children.
Okay.
Promote the Muslim identity, the Islamic identity. Next, our goal is outreach. And so outreach plays a tremendous part of our agenda. So outreach not in like the proselytizing sense, but outreach in the sense that, you know, we're introducing Muslims to the city by and large, and introducing the city to Muslims.
Awesome.
We have, you know, we benefit mutually from that. And so the outreach work that we do, you know, we involve ourselves in like soup kitchens. We have a fastathon every Ramadan, where if a non-Muslim fasts with us and breaks their fast at the mosque with us, which is happening right now, by the way, they break their fast, we'll donate $100 in their name to the Center for Refugee Services.
That's awesome.
So you can sign up on our website, mcecc.com, and things like that. We're always looking for new ideas. We encourage all of our young people to get involved, and that's it. I mean, we're just always looking for new things to do. Overall, it's a faith of an activist. It's a, you know, it's a religion of activists. I mean, we have the worship side of it, and then the rest of it is all activism. Well, I would throw in personal etiquette as well. That's also very important in Islamic faith. But the rest of it, it's social activism, economic activism, you know, protection of civil rights, protection of families, promotion of education. So we have this you hear the term Sharia all the time, right? What you don't hear is like an actual explanation of what it is. But we have this concept called Maqasid al-Sharia, which means like the essence of Sharia. And it's the preservation of life, the preservation of family, the preservation of education, and the preservation of your rights. So that's Sharia.
That's beautiful.
So that's part of our religion.
That's great. So what community service projects have you been directly involved in recently?
So, well, right now, because it's Ramadan, we're doing the fastathon. So what I've been doing, aside from marketing it to individuals, what I've been doing is trying to reach out to city leaders, city councilmen, people running for office, to come introduce themselves, let the Muslim community get acquainted with them, and to know that they're our leaders, but they're also our servants. So just the other day, Ray Saldana, city councilman of District 4, he came to the mosque, and he was excited to be there. He brought his wife. We had a couple of people from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion with the City of San Antonio. They came. They were excited about fasting. Manny Pelaez, who's running for City Council in District 8, which is where the 2 major mosques are. He came. He was excited. You know, we're constantly sending out invitations. I never hold it against someone who doesn't come, just because I understand they're busy. But that's what we're doing right now.
That's wonderful. That's really great. I remember a few months ago we did an interview for TPR about local hate crimes that were happening to Muslims here in San Antonio specifically, and how we combat those things. And the woman that I was speaking with, she said that no city leader in San Antonio really had reached out to your community to express, you know, we're here for you, we want to protect you. Have you had an experience with that as well?
Yeah, so it's been, you know, so lately I've been doing more outreach than they have with us. So I will say this: Ron Nirenberg is the city councilman for our district, for the mosque. He has maintained a relationship with us.
That's great.
He's been good about that. That being said, you know, I'll never lay it on them completely to just constantly reach out to us. It's a two-way street. I get that, but he's been good about it. We're satisfied with his you know, degree of outreach. William McManus, you know, he was invited to the mosque to come speak, and he showed up. He was interested. He came and gave a rousing speech. During the general election, we had all three major mayoral candidates come and speak. Manny Pelaez has been coming to speak a lot. He's very supportive of the community. Some are easier to get a hold of than others. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, great. So as an individual, do you consider volunteering in the community to be a strictly religious responsibility, or is it something that also gives you personal sense of fulfillment and joy, or maybe they're intertwined, together in this?
I see it as both. I mean, like I said, Islam is a religion of activists, but that part isn't really the part that's stressed the most. Not because it's looked down upon or anything, but there's a more emphasis. Like if you go to the mosque, the more emphasis is on having faith, strengthening your faith, and personal etiquettes. How you treat your family, how you treat your neighbors, your children, family life and stuff, the ideal Islamic family life. That's mostly what gets covered. So then it's up to people like me and other activists in the community to kind of highlight the activist side of it.
Great. Okay. Shahad, do you do any community service that you're really interested in? Or you said that you're going to nursing, so that's a sense of giving back.
Yes, I do nursing. I've helped out with the charities and everything, raising money before for cancer. I've done. I used to work with. I used to do modeling, to go to the hospitals, raise money for them, which is like they put a crown on you and they go in and we give out papers to Santa Rosa and they would sign it, and people who wants to donate, they would donate, and food and clothing, and yes, we've done that before.
So since she's in nursing school, there's actually at the MCCC we're opening up a youth center, which is going to have a medical clinic in it.
Okay.
So if you're, there's plenty to do, plenty of volunteering to do. It's going to open up in the coming years.
Can non-Muslims come volunteer? Because I would love to help you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. Yay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the ways that GET helps people understand the importance of voting is by helping them connect the dots between public policy decisions, which you touched on, and the challenges that they face as individuals or as part of a community. Shahad, as an immigrant, is living in America what you originally expected it to be?
No.
No.
Not
How's it
at all.
different?
Not at all. I've never thought myself would be in America one day, or I would ever be right here. It all started when we found out that my little sister was sick. We were all confused because one of my older brother was sick as well, and he was going through it for 11, 12 years. He had thalassemia, and my little sister as well. I never thought myself one day I would even travel outside of Kurdistan. We went to Syria and everything. We applied to Sweden to go to Sweden, and they said, you know what, Sweden is not the place for the cure. America, there is hospital, there is San Antonio, they've been doing chemotherapy. You have to apply to go there, do your application, and we'll help you out. And American people are very good with it. And so they gave us the choice to come here to the US. We didn't have the choice. All we wanted is for my brother and my sister to get better. So this is how we got here.
Wow. Well, we're glad you're here,
Thank
despite
you.
the circumstances, So another question for both of you is, have you ever personally been discriminated against while here in the United States? And if so, how did you overcome it? And did you turn to your faith for guidance through those times?
Do you want to go first?
Yes, I mean, at school when I first came here, I was very young, of course. I was only 10, 11 years old. They would always say, go back to your country, you're terrorists. I mean, of course, people here don't know. They don't know where you come from, what you are, who you are. So they would always judge you. And not everybody, I'm not saying everybody. Yes, they would always say, go back to your country. Even in middle school, I would go to school, people will make fun of us for our names, for where we come from. And I would always go home and talk to my parents. I have those kids that are bullying me. They say, you know what, keep your faith very strong in God and Allah, of course, because He's the one that one day you might become something big. And they say, you know what, she's a Muslim. She became a doctor. They would always talk to me like that. Be the, how do you say, they say, be the bigger person. Don't answer back. So I would never answer back. I would never talk back to them. They would call me a terrorist. I would just walk away.
Knowing that you're not, of course.
Of course, of course.
Yeah. Wow. Well, okay. I'm going to be more likely.
So I was 15 or 16 when 9/11 happened, and so I was in high school. I think overall, San Antonio, I know your experience is different, but for me at least, it was, generally speaking, a tolerant city. It could be because I'm a guy, and it's easier to pick on girls for some people. So I'm not going to say that I had it easy. I did face, my father had a business in Bernie, and we did get some threatening letters and stuff from people, and it could have been from people who were our normal customers, would see us every day. So there's that fear. Then of course, sometimes you tend to be hot-headed, and you think, I challenge someone to say something to me. So my parents had that fear more than me, for me. But I will say, it's generally, I've probably had it easier than most. I haven't faced it in work. Most of the discrimination that you hear about in the news is mostly work discrimination. Other than that, it's the people that you see on the street that are just harassing Muslims, which does happen, but it has not happened.
Thank you for sharing your time, your thoughts, and your experiences with us. We're so glad you're here in San Antonio. I've been here my whole life. I was born and raised here, so I'm so glad to see our city expanding and just welcoming new people and new cultures and new outlooks and perspectives. And we look forward to hearing what great things you do, obviously with your community center and the mosque, and you becoming a nurse. That's so wonderful. You're giving back in that way. So for anyone interested in learning more about Islam, please contact any of the organizations listed on the screen.
Our mission is to serve humanity. Rahma Relief Foundation has been working to help alleviate the pain Syrians have gone through since the beginning of the crisis. Through the support of our donors and partners, we've been able to aid Syrians spread over 6 countries through 12 different yearly and seasonal programs. Yearly programs focus on the daily life of Syrian families and include water distribution, food baskets filled with cooking essentials, container shipments that bring clothes and other donations, and refugee assistance to help those that have been resettled in America. To help the kids, there are education programs, orphan sponsorship, baby formula distribution, and mental health programs to help them work through the trauma of experiencing war. Seasonal programs include soup kitchens during the month of Ramadan, Udhiyah campaigns which distribute meat, Eid clothes, and gifts during Eid al-Adha, and our Warm the Children campaign, which helps families get through the harsh winter months by distributing kits containing blankets, winter clothes, firewood, and fuel. Humanity comes in different sizes with different needs, and the Rahma Relief Foundation is here to help serve them all. Because compassion, mercy, and transparency is how we make our difference. To learn more, visit rahmarelief.org.